Hello, everyone out there in podcast world. Hope you're having a great day. You're listening to the Service Business Mastery Podcast. I'm your host, Tersh Blissett. Today's episode, super exciting. We're going to talk about growing like a lobster with the author, Joshua Dick. And the title of the book kind of throws you off a little bit. Whenever I first received it, it was like, okay, that's cool. And it made me super inquisitive, so I had to pick it up and read it. But the biggest thing about this book I say the biggest thing, one of the immediate takeaways that I took away from this book is knowing your audience. And for those of you who have listened recently, you know that I've been on this kick about knowing your avatar. And then I didn't realize I was talking about it as much as I was until I was interviewed by someone else. I was interviewed by 3 other people, and they ended up titling the page, the interview, knowing your avatar. And this is when it clicked. I was like, okay, I must be on an avatar kick right now. But I really picked that out of this book, and I'm excited to talk about something that I haven't even realized and it's extremely important. And Josh talks about three different avatars, or 3 different knowing your audiences. And but first off, I want to welcome you to the show, Josh.
Tersh, thank you so much for having me. It's really a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, actually, super exciting. I mean, I'm so thankful that you're able to make it with us because physically you are in Italy right now. If you're listening to this in the future, it is April 22nd of 2020. So we're in the middle of a huge pandemic and a very scary situation. And I'm so thankful that you're able to be with us on today's show.
It is my pleasure, and the wonders of technology that I can be here with you. And this is probably one of the best things I could be doing during a lockdown. I don't have to go anywhere. So it's great.
Very true. Very true. So tell us a little bit about yourself, your history, and what makes you an expert in the ability to write a book.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I don't know if I can call myself an expert or someone that hoped I have a message that's of value to people. So I spent a pretty varied career, starting out actually doing investment banking. Hated it, but learned a lot from it, and set out to actually change course and went to grad school and got an MBA and actually moved into marketing and sales of consumer products, detergents, soaps. Toothpaste was really the one I worked on the most. But I had this calling to go back to a business where I had ability to make something and touch something. And within my family, there had been a business started by my great-grandfather that was primarily a textile business, sewing different products for the restaurant industry, lots of different sewing machines and production equipment. And that business had some difficulties, some trouble. And I ended up making the decision to leave my job at Unilever in marketing and try to get involved with the family business, which ended up being a business that I totally transformed by closing over 50% of the revenue producing product lines, and really stripping it down to a very small business. It was about 12 employees when I got started. And we focused only on manufacturing because manufacturing was very important to me. I liked the idea of making stuff.
Yeah.
And what we made were cleaning products for coffee machines. So, pretty simple.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah.
So that's residential or commercial coffee machines?
So primarily commercial. So everything you might see used to clean the type of equipment that you'd find in a Starbucks or a Dunkin' Donuts or a McDonald's all over the world. It eventually grew from this 12 employee business just in the New York area to products that were sold in over 70 countries around the world. We were fortunate enough to get large enough to open distribution centers in Holland and Hong Kong to satisfy customer demand. Yeah, and continuing to manufacture most everything in New York. And then eventually the business was sold, and that was what gave me the opportunity to move here to Italy.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, we little known fact I don't even know if most of the listeners know this, but for years we've serviced all of the Mastrina, the Starbucks products and everything. So
I know the machine very well. Yeah, it's a very, very special way to make coffee. Yeah.
And it's so funny because we've needed like little clear tubes, little clear hoses, and it's like, nope, only comes from Sweden. And we're like, nah, we can go to Home Depot and find one. We go to Home Depot and it's like everything's millimeter and it's internal diameter versus out OD. And I was like, okay, we won't try and fix your machine with these American things. We'll call for Sweden. Swedish farts. That was so
Amazing.
funny. Cool. Small world. So tell us why you wrote this book and a little bit about the book in general.
Yeah. So when I was fortunate enough to sell the business and have this sort of flexibility to make some different decisions and changes in my life, I sat down and I read over the course of my 15 years running and building the business. I had kept a diary, a
Mm.
business diary, where I would write down mostly things I was upset about or annoyed with or frustrated or scared about. And I sat down and read the whole thing. It was almost 500 pages. And I looked at it and said, boy, I learned a lot over the course of this process. And I learned a lot of things that I wish someone had told me
Yeah.
when I was getting started. And I thought, yeah, maybe I should really organize it in a way that could help people sort of build the foundations for a business following what I consider a pretty lean, efficient, simplified approach to what you need to do to make your business special. And
Mm.
that's really where the idea of grow like a lobster came from. If you're curious, I can explain the
Yeah, I
title.
was going to say, because I read it and it is really interesting. And uh, we don't have lobsters here close by, but I have gone lobster diving and fishing for it. And it's a really amazing concept. Could you explain
Yeah.
like that whole?
Yeah. So early on in my career, I had read this book just out of personal pleasure about the life of lobsters and how they evolve. And there was this image of the lobster. Every time it needs to grow, it has to actually shed its hard protective shell. And it's a very traumatic and painful process where if they don't do it right or they don't do things quickly enough, they can die. And even when they are successful, they lay there on the bottom of the ocean as this vulnerable, fleshy mess.
Mhm.
And I'm reading it and I said, oh my God, that's me. That's kind of how I feel when I'm running a business at certain times. When, there are times that things are good and I feel like we're going in the right
Right.
direction,
Yeah.
but there are other times when I just felt so weak and vulnerable. And I took to talking about the molt and the idea of the planning and preparing for the molt with my team.
Mhm.
And they would get, if you worked for me over those years, they'd be like, if he brings up the lobster one more time, I'm going to shoot him. But it was my way of talking to the team about remembering that when times are good, they're not always going to stay that way.
Mhm.
And if we use that time and we use that knowledge that molts or bad times are coming, we can do things when we have the time and the effort to available to prepare for the molt and to get ourselves ready for that. And that was really my premise of how to run a business, doing the things that you need to do foundationally throughout the way so that you're ready when bad things happen.
Yeah, that is such a good point because I've been told or I've heard this and I just stuck with me and uh it's being a business owner in general. When you're at your highs, it's almost like you're just before outgrowing your shell, and you're like, okay, we're good, we're solid, I feel great, and then you get to that point to where you have to outgrow your shell, and then it's like you're cramped in, you're like, oh, you're like, I need something else, and then you bust out, and then you're
Yeah.
super vulnerable, like you said, and that it's a super scary time, especially if you haven't been there, and it's weird because I have a lot of mentors and coaches and just peers that are a lot larger than we are. And they're like, oh, yeah, just do that. And you're like, oh, yeah, that sounds like a piece of cake because you've done it a couple times. You've gone through that
Yeah.
process. I haven't done this before. So, like, it's terrifying for me. And so I'm at that stage where I'm like that super vulnerable and then you look back and it's like, oh, well, it wasn't really that bad, but
I, I tend to think that if we remember or we recognize that the difficult times are inevitable,
mhm,
they become a little bit easier to handle when they get there, when they arrive, because you're not so surprised.
mhm.
And then you can sort of save your energy being upset about what just happened and dedicate it more on figuring out how to get out of it and how to harden your shell. You know what I mean? How to harden your shell again.
Absolutely. Cool. So since we're going to talk about the avatars and the three different parts of the knowing your audience, the first one's in chapter 4. Could you dive a little bit into that a little bit for me?
Yeah. So I had this experience in business school in general that really sort of a light bulb went off in my head, where I realized that I was not my audience. I was very different than the people I was trying to sell my products to.
Oh, that's a
And
great
by,
point. I think that
yeah,
we need to take a second and
yeah,
just dive into that. I mean, just like reminisce on that a little bit, because as service business owners, this is us so
yeah,
often. And you have to know that you're not selling to yourself. You're not selling to the person who wants to fix their own AC unit. You're selling to a person who values their time and
yeah.
doesn't want to do that. So go ahead. Sorry for interrupting you
Yeah,
there.
no, no. I think it probably applies to all products. I used to say to my team when we would do marketing campaigns, I'd be like, so they would tell me what they liked about a marketing campaign. And I would say, you're not your audience.
Hmm.
You have to tell me you have to understand who you're selling to or who you're marketing to well enough to imagine what they're going to think about the campaign or the approach or the story you're going to tell. Don't worry about yourself. Most of the time, your ideas, you're just too close to it.
Yep.
You think about things too differently. So you have to really find a way to get to understand what's important to them. And for me, that was sort of experiencing the coffee industry, spending time in the coffee industry, talking to baristas, seeing the problems, learning how to make a great coffee, because I wanted to see what the challenges and problems were
Hmm.
as someone that didn't have experience doing those things. And I think in any industry, we have to put some effort into understanding who the audience is and what's important to them.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I agree 100%. So how about part two there?
Yeah. So the know your audience, it's sort of, I look at it as there's at least three things you should know. You
Hmm.
should know your audience, you should know your competition, and you should know yourself. So, knowing your audience and just to go to finish on the know your audience, you're also have to remember that it's not just the people you're selling things to, but it's the people that work for you. They're part of your audience as well. You have to understand what's important to them. We've all run businesses where it's difficult to get people to show up, or
Yeah.
it's difficult to keep them happy or motivated to do things. You have to understand what's going on in their mind, what's important to them. And then it's also important, I think, to start to understand what's going on with your competitors. How are
Hmm.
they operating? Are they under stress? Are they well capitalized? Are they a family business? Where do they live? Just to understand as much as you can about them will help you understand how to compete
So
effectively with.
with the I want to dive into both of those a little bit, but with the employees, are you okay? So what happens if somebody's listening and they have 10 people already? Is it too
Yep.
late for them to learn their employees and to kind of know their perfect employee? And should they, okay, so if they do an internal research and say, okay, this is my perfect employee, this is the perfect avatar, but I have 5 people who don't match that, do I need to get rid of those people, or do I need to just try and coach those people? Or
I tend to have this feeling that you can't sort of have the perfect type of employee. They're not all going to ever be the same.
Mhm.
And when an employee was not working out for me, the first place I would usually go to look was myself, and to understand if I had been clear and consistent in the message and expectations I had communicated to that employee in a way that was easy enough for them to follow. And if my message is inconsistent, I had a hard time sort of being critical of them. So, I think the first place is to understand that. Are you doing a good job? Are you clear? Are you consistent? Are you telling the story of what you want of them clearly and properly? And are you delivering that, with discipline? Because sometimes we are easier on one employee than another, and you need to be consistent because everybody is watching everybody, and
Mhm.
you need to lead and you need to define things clearly so that your audience, your employees, are able to respond to it properly.
Yeah.
People do work because they call it work. They don't call it play. You have to. Yeah.
Good point. Good point. So what we've done in that scenario is we created scorecards, and we've taken ideas from several coaching organizations, but uh, it takes the emotion out of everything because everything's run by metrics. So me and employee A could click really well because our personalities click very well. Um, but their metrics may be lower than an employee B who I don't really click very well with, but if I was just doing it based off of emotions, I would give employee A a raise versus employee B, who actually is doing a lot better job. And so it takes all the emotions out of it. And then also when it comes to disciplinary actions, it's they see it black and white. It's like, okay, like they know that they screwed up. So the disciplinary actions are, it's there and they're expected. It's not, oh wow, this is a surprise. I didn't know that I was going to get reprimanded for doing that task incorrectly. And so I think that that's been our biggest game changer,
Yeah.
where everybody knows the accountability, and people like to be held accountable. Like, that's, as a leader, it's hard for me because I want to be their friend,
Yeah.
but people like to be held accountable. They like to know what standard they're going to be held to. And it's been very helpful for me since we started doing that.
Yeah, it's unbelievable how much people appreciate consistency, clarity of the message and the expectations. And if you find yourself trying to be supportive or friendly with them,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes you really go down a bad and difficult path. You read the book, but one of the things that this brings to mind is a little story I told in the book about our plant production and operations team.
Mm-hmm.
And we would often see that first thing in the morning, there would be a whole long line of people asking questions.
Yes.
They would be like, where should I be? What should I be doing? And I started to observe it. And I said to our plant manager, I said, dude, they're just asking questions because it's easier than than
Figuring it
starting to
out.
work.
Yeah.
And I challenged him, and I would always challenge the plant managers to try and spend a day not speaking, and try and make sure that they had prepared enough visual instructions for where people were expected to be, whether it be a whiteboard saying your job assignment for the day, to eliminate the possibility of them having to ask you a question that would take away from their contribution to the business.
Oh
And I
my
challenged them to
gosh.
behave as if they had laryngitis and only point to the wall and try it.
That's really cool. So yeah, that's really awesome. There was a time several years ago where I got this idea from, I believe it was Entree Leadership by Dave Ramsey, but I was getting, this is not an exaggeration, like literally I was getting between 90 and 110 phone calls a day, and it was beyond exhausting. I literally, for a several week period, I couldn't get a first thing completed. And it was one of those things where it was just like, hey, what do I do in this situation? What do I do here? What do I do there? And it was like, I was getting phone calls that said, what do you think the situation is going? What do you think is going on with this piece of equipment? And I'm like, okay, well, run me through the diagnostics and everything. Oh, I haven't even gotten on the roof yet. Like, oh, I'm going to slap you because
Yeah.
you're just calling me to chit chat at this point.
Yeah.
And so what I did was I started saying, every time you called me with a problem, you had to also provide me with 3 solutions as well.
Huh.
And if you don't provide me with 3 solutions, I'm going to hang up on you immediately. I said that one time in a meeting, and
Yeah.
then I stuck to it. And they called me, and I said, okay, well, what's your 3 solutions? And they're like, well, I don't have any. Click. And they're like,
Yeah.
oh, they call me right back. I think we got disconnected. Yes, we did. Click.
Yeah.
And then they're like, oh yeah, solutions. So then they called me back, and and then eventually it got to where I was getting 3 to, like, now I literally might go 3 or 4 days without a phone call from my team, because
Fantastic.
they have to come to me with 3 solutions now. And by the time they've come up with 3 solutions, they've figured it out on their own. And if they do call me with 3 solutions and none of them work, then I know that they've at least put forth effort to try and figure it out. And so I'm more willing to help them in that scenario. And that was a game changer for me when it came to being. But see, the problem is, as business owners and as managers, it's an ego thing. This is my belief anyways. It's an ego thing. So you're coming to me and I can fix it. You can't figure it out, but I can fix it. So that means you have to come to me with all your problems. And so, like, pat me on the back. I can figure it out. I'm the man. So then it's like, you don't really want them to stop coming to you, because then they can figure it out. Me, like, once I got to this point where I'm like, I want to hire people that are smarter than me, and I really truly meant that, that's whenever kind of the game changed for our business.
It's unbelievable. When you start what you said is so true and so powerful, because when you get over the need for that satisfaction of people needing you, and you ask yourself if you're dedicating time to helping them fix a problem that you're paying them to fix is the
Mm-hmm.
best thing for the business,
Mm-hmm.
you get past the emotion pretty quickly and you say, you know what? I don't so much need that as much as I would much prefer to see the business grow.
Yep.
I love to see the next sale happen without and maybe I'd like to be able to go home and do something with my kids, as opposed to doing the job of the person I'm paying.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, basically it got to the point to where I was like, look, guys, I can hire a monkey to do the same thing that y'all are doing right now, because they're not thinking for themselves. You're not thinking for yourselves. I am like you're an extension of my arms out there in the field, because like, why? And then that was whenever it kind of clicked. And now it's to the point to where like I have a team of people who know way more than I do. And they like, somebody will say, well, I want to talk to Tersh about this. I'm like, you're going to get way more advice from him. Like you're going to get much better advice from him than you're going to get from me. But you want to talk to me just because I own the business, that's fine. But whatever questions you ask me, just know that I'm probably texting Justin or one of the guys and I'm asking them the same question, and whatever they give me, that's the answer you're going to get.
One little thing that also comes to mind is I developed somewhere over my career this idea that I didn't like answering the same questions multiple times. And I basically assigned to everyone in the organization to write what I called, if I get hit by a bus book,
Yes.
and to document and write things. And I find even to this day in my personal life, I live here in Italy, and I get a lot of questions from people that want to know the best restaurants or want to know where to do this. And I found myself in the beginning writing an email each time someone would write me.
Mm-hmm.
And I finally just wrote and created a PDF. And when they ask me, I send them that same PDF over and over. And I did that throughout my business as well. This is the way you do this. This is how you get here. This is how you turn on this machine. Let's write it and just be able to make it available to people to save the time and effort of doing it over and over again. The same thing.
Yeah, that's what I was just actually looking for it in your book. I felt like there was a section there where you actually describe document your job. Yeah. 120, page 127, document your job. Yeah. That's something that I think that everybody should do. I think that everybody should document their job and their tasks throughout the day, because like you said, you get hit by a bus and you're like, what was Bob's job to do anyways? Like not only the accountability and like, why am I paying this guy to do this job that I have no idea what's going on? What happens if we have to replace him in an emergency situation? And every time you ask somebody that, and I know that you probably dealt with this a lot, and it's like, wait a minute, why do you want me to write down my job? Are you trying to replace me? Are you trying to, find somebody else to do my job better or what? And it's like, no, we're trying, like, what happens if you get hit by a bus? Literally, I don't know what you're doing.
I tell you a funny story. When I first started in my business, there was a woman who answered the phones who had been there a long time, and getting to the original factory with a commercial trailer required some sort of navigation in a certain way. Mm-hmm. And within the first couple of weeks, I must have heard this woman with the phone on her shoulder yell across the office, "How do you get here from exit 27 on this highway?" In a trailer. And then I would hear someone else put down what they were doing, come over, get on the phone and explain it. And I was like, guys, let's write this down from every exit that gets here so that she doesn't interrupt everyone else's productivity and efficiency to answer the same question that I've heard asked 5 times in the last 10 days. And those were little things that we kept doing that would slowly drive costs and wastes out of the organization.
Yeah. And people don't realize that things that take your time away from, like, your notifications at the bottom of your screen, every time one of those pops up, it takes an average of 6 seconds out of your day. So even if you think you're ignoring it, it still takes 6 seconds out of every minute. That's 10% of every minute out of your day. And so, like, little things like that, you don't realize how much time it takes out of your day. It just builds up in a compound effect across the day. It's like people checking Facebook. They're like, oh, it's only taking me 10 minutes. Like, yeah, 10 minutes. So you got to figure, if you took 6 minutes, that's 10% of 1 hour. Like 10% of your hour is gone just by scrolling through Facebook. you
Yeah,
know?
it's similarly like meetings. I was famous for, meetings needed to start on time because
Yeah.
it's a meeting of four and two people are late. Everyone else is wasting that time. We got
Yeah.
to a point in my meeting room, we would have an hourglass sundial with 30 minutes and 60 minutes. And if there was a meeting to be discussed, if the sand ran out, I left.
Yeah.
And that was how we got
That's
things
so
done.
funny. See, look here. I have this little timer box here.
Yeah,
For
perfect.
people who are watching or people who are listening, I have this little cube that's got this time, and then you flip it over, and whatever time's on the top, it just automatically sets your timer for that amount of time, and then it just goes off at that time. And so
Fantastic.
it's really one of those things because you don't realize how much time you'll spend and death by meetings. I don't know if you've ever
Huh.
read that book, or I think Cameron Harold maybe.
I
He
haven't
wrote,
read it, but I'll look for it. Yeah.
yeah, well, Cameron Harold's written a couple of books about meetings and how meetings suck. I think that's the name of his books, Meetings Suck.
Meetings suck.
Yeah, and it's so often, like, this pandemic is horrible. Don't get me wrong at all. Don't take this the wrong way. But the one good thing that I've found is how we're going to figure out very quickly how many meetings could have been an email
Mhm.
from this pandemic, because there's so many meetings that we've had that have now become emails that are quick and concise emails, that we just had the meetings just because they were meetings, and they really were a time suck for businesses. So for small business owners out there that are listening, take that into consideration. Like, having a business, like having your business and having the whole team come into the office and sit down for a weekly meeting, like, what are you really gaining out of it? Now, if you're gaining stuff out of it, keep doing it.
Yeah.
But if you're not, if you're just doing it to do it because all the other small businesses in town have a weekly meeting, but you're not really gaining anything out of it, stop doing it. You're costing yourself money, and it's going to, and if you have 10 people in there doing it for 2 hours or an hour and a half, like, that adds up very quickly, but you don't really think about that, if you've
Yeah.
always done it.
I was a big believer in standing meetings. People
I
get
like
to the
that.
point a lot faster if you don't give them chairs. So
That's-
we would always have a room with high tables, sort of like cafe height tables, and meeting got done.
that's really cool. That's really cool. And not only that, it's like ergonomically, I like my desk here, I have it lifted up and I stand because I used to sit down for 8 hours, but now I stand for 8 hours. So it works a lot better.
No, it's super healthy that way. Yeah, lots of things you can do to drive waste. Communication, though, within your team is really important. And I think one experience that I had very early in my career was as the CEO, a lot of different people wanted to tell me things. And there were times that I would hear something from the production floor or from marketing or from sales, and they would tell me as the CEO what was going on. But I found myself having to turn around and tell other members of the team because not always was the team interacting. And one of the ways that we solved that was a weekly sort of team summary where there was a distribution group of just 5 or 6 of the most senior people. And each one would give a short 5-line update to all of us. And that really got the conversations going and the interactions. And it saved me as the CEO a lot of wasted time having to like hear something from marketing and tell it to sales. They were starting to share with me and themselves together. And it was just a simple like, what did I do great this week? I actually wrote a little blog about it. I don't remember all 5 steps, but it was what was an accomplishment, what was a problem, what was a recognition, a thanks to someone that did something great. What do I have going on next week? And what are my concerns or failures? I can pull up the actual 5
Yeah,
while we're talking.
we'll get that and add it to
Yeah.
the show notes, because that
Yeah.
is really cool. Because one of the things that I deal with, and I'm dealing with that in Service Emperor, our newest business, is a service expert will call me and we're just chit chatting because it's a level 1 call, because we do level 1, 3, and 5. So if it's a 5, it's like life-changing emergency. Level 3,
Yeah.
call me back today, please. Level 1, chit chat. So it's a level 1 call. We're just chit chatting, and they'll tell me something in conversation, and then they don't tell the dispatcher because they told me. And I'm like, don't ever do that, please. It's like, if it's a dispatcher call, like if it's something pertaining to dispatcher, always tell the dispatcher. Don't assume that I'm going to tell the dispatcher. Don't assume that I'm going to tell the office manager. Don't assume that I'm going to tell a bookkeeping. Like, don't assume any of that stuff. Like, just assume that if you tell me, it went out the window. Because if in passing conversation, yes, I'll tell them, but I don't always remember. And as soon as I put down the phone with you, I might pick up the phone with somebody else, or I might get on a webinar, and it might be 3 or 4 hours before I even see anybody or interact with anybody. So
100%, you got it right. It's like the proverbial, the old water cooler, like what you learn at the water cooler. You can't let things only be learned at the water cooler. While we're talking, I can give you the 5 topics if you want. Perfect. Really quickly. Yeah,
that's awesome.
So it was an accomplishment. What was my greatest accomplishment this week? What's a disappointment? What was a disappointment I had this week? What's my big objective for next week? What's the future? A recognition. Thanking someone on the team or outside the organization, so that kind of built things. And then other, what else is on your mind? Is something that you're concerned about, something you're excited about, just enough to share. And that might be a salesperson explaining that they're close on a new customer, or appreciation for a vendor that delivered a product that we thought we were going to have to wait 2 weeks for, and we got in 2 days, so that everyone knows to be nice to that vendor. When it comes time to pay the vendor, maybe they get paid first because they hooked us up.
Yeah, totally. And it's funny because so often, I'll experience that, or my wife will experience that. And then the guys out in the field, they don't know that this vendor went above and beyond for us. And then they're treating them like garbage. And then this other vendor that does crap for us, they're treating them like gold. And it's like, if you have that conversation, then they know that this vendor, they really hooked us up. And the next time you go in there, high five them, hey man, appreciate you helping us out that time. But if they didn't know that it even happened, then they would just go in there, and then the vendor could get butt hurt because they're like, man, these guys are treating me like crap, or not even acknowledging the fact that I went above and beyond for them. And then that's good. That's gold right there.
It all started with, the blog is called Pass It On my website, but it all started with me. I basically got tired of trying to tell stuff to everybody on the team individually. And I started writing these little 5-line emails on Friday as a way to sort of clear my head and leave the office at the end of the week and go home and, kind of have a different life. And I realized, boy, people really appreciated it. It was starting dialogue. And I went down the organization. I said, hey, I want you to write one of those and include all 5 of us on it. And it became sort of something we did within the team. And the expectation was that, before you went home on Friday, you sent something out short, 5 sentences, or 5 little things, not too long. And when it was too long, I would criticize them. I said, no one's going to read that. Get to the nugget of it.
Oh yeah, totally. And it's funny because in our coaching organization, we were just talking about that. It was what type of reader are you? We were talking about copy just in general and creating copy. And I'm definitely a small portions, small nugget consumer, like you said. And if it's a long story, I might get to it, I might not. And if it's a nugget, I'll consume it right then, and it's great. But I
always tell people, don't forget about the bullet point. Would you forget about the bullet point? That's all you need.
Exactly. And I'll consume it, and I'll give you feedback on the bullet point. But if you write an essay, it's like, I'll try to force myself through it, but if it's not gold, like right in the beginning, you could have the gold nugget at the end, but it's
know your audience. We have to know what people can accept and absorb.
Absolutely. Joshua, I appreciate you. I appreciate everything that you've given to us and all the time you spent with us today. When people want to reach out to learn more about you, get your book, where do we go for that?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Tersh. It's been a pleasure to be here. So the book, Grow Like a Lobster, Plan and Prepare for Extraordinary Business Results, is on Amazon everywhere in the world. There's also an Audible version of it, on Grow Like a Lobster, and a Kindle if you're a listener, as opposed to a reader. And so there's a website, growlikealobster.com. And then there's also a personal website, joshua-dick.com, where you can subscribe to my blog. There's a contact page and all of that. And the blogs are 3-4 minute reads, maybe once every couple of weeks. So it's not overwhelming releases of this stuff.
Cool, man. I appreciate it. I appreciate everything you've done for us.
Thank you so much for having me.
And thank you. And be safe over there in Italy.
You too.
And everybody out there listening to this episode or watching it on YouTube, if you're listening to this, just do know that most of our episodes we're able to upload to YouTube also if you're a watcher. But with that being said, thank you for listening to the Service Business Mastery Podcast. The podcast focused on service business owners, managers, and technicians who are considering becoming business owners themselves. Until next time, be safe out there and use your proper PPE. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to either one of us, Josh or myself. And also, my email address is tersh@serviceemperor.com. That's the new domain. So if you use the old one, it still links back to the new one. But for those of you who are listening to it now, you get to use the new one. So it's tersh@serviceemperor.com. But with that being said, have a great day, and we'll talk again next week.